I'm going to start by speaking in Portuguese. Hello, everyone. At least from Brazil, I would like to say good morning, a warm good morning, a good morning that is very much looking forward to the day we're having today. I am Maria Clara Araújo. I am the coordinator of movement partnerships from the Black Feminist Fund. I am an Afro-Brazilian travesti. I am an activist. I am a trans activist and researcher of the Black trans feminist movements. And today I have the pleasure of opening the path and welcoming everyone who's here today to follow our third episode of the Black Feminist Politics series. So, as an introduction, I believe it's important since I don't know if everyone followed or if a good part of the audience followed our two first previous episodes. So, the Black Feminist Politics series was to disseminate the Black feminist knowledge that was created and thought and imagined by our partner movements. The Black Feminist Politics series is part of our follow up plan, and this is the third time we're inviting our partner movements to share their analysis, to share their knowledges, and to share the unique way and the powerful way in which the Black feminist movements that we support, the way that they define and how they define themselves, and the way that they offer solutions to their own territories, as well as the way that they're contributing to the construction of transnational bridges. And since I have just mentioned the importance of building transnational bridges, that is also the reason that led us to choose the Caribbean as, let's put it this way, the theme for this episode. For those of you who followed our first episodes, we started by discussing the authoritarianism. And then on the second episode, we talked about how the Black feminist movements define this context of multiple crises, diverse territories, how diverse territories are facing their own struggles. And then in this third episode, we invite Black feminist movements from the Caribbean to share with us their knowledges, their learning, and the solutions. These movements not only have solutions for the Caribbean as well as for the entire context, because it's part of the Black feminist practice to always try to bridge, to build a vision that understands the micro, but also the macro. And that is the reason why our episode today has as its goal to discuss the Caribbean in the crossroads. I will not now invite our moderator, the person who also co-built the proposal for this webinar alongside me. And we're very happy and excited that she accepted our invitation to be part of this panel. So our moderator is Zoe Mensages. She's a lawyer and activist and a Caribbean creative from Antigua and Barbuda. She believes in occupying spaces unapologetically. And she's a fellow of the Black Feminist Fund, and she's currently acting as a program associate of the Nebula Fund. Zoe, well, welcome to go on with your moderation. A good debate for us all. Welcome to go on with your moderation. A good debate for us all.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for that introduction, Maria Clara. Good morning, good afternoon, good night to everyone. I'm so excited to be here and be in community with all of you. so me, Maria Clara has talked about who I am professionally,
Maria
but I
Clara me apresentou.
also want to speak about who I am as a person and why this is important to me. I'm a black feminist, true and true. I am born in Antigua, but I identify as a Caribbean woman. So this topic and being here with you is something that is of great importance to me, and I'm so grateful for the opportunity. This is what I call a reason to say life nice. Thank you more, please. Today, this topic that we're talking about is very timely. The Caribbean is no problem. The Caribbean is a beautiful space, but we are extremely diverse. And I'm so grateful to the Black Feminist Fund and this Black Feminist Politics series for giving us the opportunity to engage each other through bridging the barrier of language justice, allowing us to connect and hear about the amazing work. And Maria Clara touched on transnational work and connecting, and it's so important for the movement building and the work that we do as Black feminists to engage in a transnational perspective and engage one another. We have an amazing panel, and so I want to go on to introduce everybody in our panel. First person I want to start with is Johanna from Mama Tingo. Johanna Augustine Federico. She was born in the city of Monte Plata, Dominican Republic. She's a poet, an accountant, activist, an anti racist, feminist, and community leader. She's a founding member and current general coordinator of the Mama Tingo Socio-Political Women's Collective. And she comes to this space with more than 15 years of experience in social work with adolescents and young people. She is her activism and her experiences, they all stem, her activism and the work that she does stems from her experience as a Black woman. And then, additionally, our second panelist, I actually, before I move on, I invite each panelist to just give a little hello so you know who is who. I invite each panelist to just give a little hello so you know who is who.
Hello, my name Johanna Agustin Federico. I am from Dominican Republic and currently I coordinate the movement of social political women of Mamatingo. It's a movement of Black women anti-racism.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Our second panelist today is Tara Lena Marachuca Saint Helia. Tara is from Haiti. She is a lesbian woman from Port-au-Prince, an activist journalist, and a queer feminist activist. She's committed to the fight for human rights. She works alongside young Haitian feminists and LGBTQ plus communities. And she's also the general coordinator of Grand Japan, an intersectional feminist organization that was founded in 2019. And she also runs an online magazine dedicated to feminist education and gender minority visibility. We are so excited to have Tara. Tara, say hello to everyone.
Good evening, good afternoon to all of them. I I'm here with you today as an intersection of feminist. I am also an activist. I am an activist from Haiti. It is a great pleasure for me to be with you. Thank you very much. I uh, I do publish in a magazine in Haiti.
Thank you so much, Tara. Thank you so much, Tara. And next up, we have Sherry Sanros, who is from Jamaica. She is representing Transwave Jamaica, and she's an experienced applied psychologist and advocate with a strong focus on research, policy development, and community empowerment. She brings her years of expertise in advancing human rights, addressing gender based violence, and improving trans health outcomes through evidence based approaches into this conversation. And at Transwave Jamaica, Sherry leads programmatic and research initiatives that shape inclusive policies and strategic interventions for marginalized communities. Sheree, let's hear you.
Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good night. It's a pleasure being here. I'm looking forward to the conversations with everyone. Looking forward to sharing with you all, and I hope that we all have a good time today.
Thank you. Last but certainly not least, we have Amina Doherty. Amina is my mentor, so this is extremely special for me, everyone. Amina is a philanthropic visionary, and I stress visionary, and global citizen with a proven track record of building effective social justice programs. She's one of the co-founders of the Black Feminist Fund. And Amina, let's hear you.
Hi, everyone. It is greetings, as we say here in the Caribbean. It is really, really lovely and special to be in community with all of you. I am actively monitoring the chat and seeing tons of people who I know and new friends who I haven't met yet. So I am just excited to get into it. I am honored to be in a space with so many wonderful folks. And yeah, Zoe, back to you. Let's get in.
Thank you for that warm welcome, Amina. And so, people, let's get into it. I love to say that, and that is what we are about to do. So, my first question goes out to Johanna. And so, Johanna, as highlighted in the webinar description, we chose the metaphor of the crossroads because it allows us to discuss different intersections that Black feminist activism is addressing in the Caribbean. In the Dominican Republic, Black women and gender expansive people are faced with anti Blackness, including anti Haitian hate, the rise of anti rights groups, as well as economic imperialism. Can you talk about this situation and the ways in which these forces impact each other?
Of course. Good morning to all of you. I am so grateful to be in this space and to converse and talk from this island. And I want to thank as well the Black Feminist Funds to make this space possible and that we can have this dialogue of this important topic. And I want to thank all the Afro-Caribbeans that are working and doing things in their territory. Well, to talk about the context of Dominican Republic, it's quite difficult because they're going through many things at the same time. And to talk about anti Blackness, anti feminism, racism, it's quite difficult because in the last years or decades, everything that they're talking about, racism, it has happened. These speeches of fascist discourses, they have become not only speeches, but also practices, political practices in Dominican Republic. And one example of this was 12 years ago. So there was a ruling 13 years ago, 162-13 of the Constitution of Dominican Republic that around 200,000 Dominican Black people that were from Haitian descendants, they left them without no nationality. And many of these people are currently that stateless. There are many of them that are stateless at this current moment. Everybody can hear me well? Can you hear me well?
We're hearing you, Johanna. You can keep going.
Very well. And so this also brought a milestone, a beginning on anti Blackness because it perpetuated violence anti Black in Dominican Republic. And we know that this is not something new on our island because on our island, the anti-Blackness, they started all the modern movement, the colonial movement, as we all are aware. But in the last decades, the different governments, that have been in charge of the country have used anti Blackness as a way to win votes. And this makes you reflect of why politicals that are the ones that are most racist are the ones that get into power. So then we ask ourselves the question, so Dominican Republic, are they racist or not? Because the ones that get into power are those that are racist and have these speeches, anti-Blackness. So in the last 5 years in the country, President Luis Davinar is the president, and it has been one of the most fascist and racist governments that have been known and anti-Blackness. And for this reason, because of all of his policies that they have created, neo-fascists that they have created in the last year, from the 2nd of October, the president launched an announcement that weekly they were going to deportation of 10,000 Asian undocumented migrants in a week. This was promulgated, and this put into risk Black people much more because it began a persecution, violence by the police and in the state. And for this reason, they went against people, not only participated, the police participated in this, but also people were part of this, and people in the community also participated in this. And for example, last year in the month of April, the president once again put into practice new measures. And the one of the most cruel ones that I can mention is the one that public hospitals turned into so a trap, like for when Black women and migrant Haitian women would go to seek health service, they are detained and
Johanna,
taken to a detention center.
I
Yes.
just want, I do have to stop you in the interest of time, but I really want to thank you for what you've shared. And really, before we move on, I want to just wrap up what you said and what some of the things that I had before we move to the next question. But thank you for your contribution. You really did share a lot of meaningful things. And what I heard from Johanna, everyone, was the way that really these people, the anti-fascists, there's a history of this anti-fascist, anti-racist behavior, and she has shown the intersecting ways in which it affects people's lives. And the last point that you were making, Johanna, about the mechanisms and the methods that they're using shows that they're willing to go to extreme lengths to enact their anti-fascist, anti-racist, anti-Haitian ideologies and bring them into practice and into reality. So again, I want to thank you for sharing this with us. We now move on to Tara, and Tara is going to speak about Haiti. Uh, Tara, Haiti, it has a special place in Black liberation history. We can't talk about Black liberation without speaking about Haiti. So again, I want to thank you for sharing this with us. But Haiti has been punished for being this inspiration. And while the mainstream narrative is of a Haiti in perpetual crisis, can you tell us about the Black feminist solutions and alternatives that Haitian feminists are creating?
No podemos hablar de la liberación negra.
But Haiti has been punished for being this inspiration. And while the mainstream narrative is of a Haiti in perpetual crisis, can you tell us about the Black
¿Me
feminist
puedes decir
solutions and
sobre
alternatives that Haitian
la
feminists
black
are creating?
feminista negra?
Could you give me just a minute?
No había escuchado.
Okay. Um,
Ah, thank you very much for this question. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you clearly.
Thank you. As many of you might know, Haiti is the first Black republic that got to know freedom. We have fought against racism. There is a revolution that was brought in by the USA.
I'm sorry, Dara, can you pause for just a second? We're not hearing any Spanish interpretation. Thank you.
She needs to go to
Araceli and
she
Kirsten, can
needs
one
to
of you
go to
please come on and
French,
interpret?
to the English audio.
I am supposed to be interpreting, but I am not seeing where to change into to hear the English to see the Spanish. I'm hearing Tyra, but I'm not hearing anything else.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you in Spanish,
Okay.
Aracelis.
Are you hearing?
Can
Hello?
you hear me in all the
Kirsten, can you
languages?
come
Can I
back on
carry on?
while we figure this out with Aracelis, please?
Okay.
Okay.
Hello? Can you
As
hear me?
I was
Yes, I
saying,
can hear you in the Spanish language.
Haiti is the first Black republic to have fought against
Okay,
colonialism
I
and
can hear you now.
slavery and racism. I know that there was the American Revolution, but this revolution was not against slavery. And in 1976, America came in, but we still had slaves in the country. We have been fighting for Black liberation. There has never been forgiveness. If we take the we had to pay for our independence or the American occupation that we had. There was intervention from humanitarian workers, but all this was part of neocolonialism. They wanted to punish those people who were seen as rebels, and we are given a lot of images from Haiti. This mediation of through these images, this reduces the struggle that is carried out by women feminists in Haiti. And these are feminists who are bringing up solutions that are very close to reality. There's exploitation and other forms of ills. I uh, I believe in sorority and the work that we are doing. If we start with an organization that is known by BFF Kesmao, for example, this feminist organization that was started in 2015, the name of this organization is reflects the slaves that were fighting against slavery. This organization has a program that is called Marrainage. What program is this? It is based on the gender and it is found in Haiti, and they are going to bring together what was happening earlier or any other person who has suffered because of gender. differences. They can therefore support the survivors. This is somebody who has gone through these problems and knows what is going on. There are women who have suffered the domestic violence and they are looking for some kind of support. And this creates some kind of sorority which is using practice that is unique to Haiti. There was a scholarship of an activist who was assassinated, and this scholarship is not the scholarship is not just about money. They wanted to be able to help children who are still in school. They want these children to become productive. And I think this is what shows what feminists are doing in Haiti. And if we allow me to carry on, there are other organizations which are older. For example, USOFA, which is an organization which is older than ours, and they have they they it came up under dictator Duvalier, and they were working on economics. They have agroecological program where they train women to be able to carry out sustainable agriculture. And we will look at Haiti. There are only 8% of women who have access to land, and that in the rural areas. If we take an example of organizations such as Atipo, which brings about the
Tara.
possibility uh, of
Hi, Tara. So again, we have just in the interest of time and making sure we get everybody's contributions, I do have to stop you, because we do want to hear everybody and everybody can benefit. Yes, but thank you so much, Tara, for your
I'm very
contribution.
sorry. I'm very sorry. I I didn't realize the time was passing so fast, but I accept. I allow you to interrupt me. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So before I go on to the next question, I do want to just do some housekeeping. I want to remind everyone that you can drop your questions in the question and answer box because we will have a section for question and answer today, and we will be able to go through the questions and choose some questions for our panelists to respond. I also want to share for our panelists, please remember for this section, we have 5 minutes to talk, as well as speak. I'm asking you to do two things: get a lot out in
Estoy
five
diciendo dos
minutes,
cosas.
but also speak slowly for interpretation
Habla
purposes.
lentamente para la
So I
interpretación.
asked you to balance for me.
Le
Sheree,
pido
I invite you now to come on platform for your question. Sheree, Transwave
para tus
Jamaica
preguntas.
works regionally across the Caribbean and is connected
¿Qué es lo que
globally.
está pasando alrededor del
Can
Caribe
you
y de
talk
la manera
about the
global?
ways in which the
¿Puedes
attack
hablar
on
de las
trans
maneras
people and communities
cómo
manifest
esto
in the
impacta en la
Caribbean
gente trans?
and how this attack is linked globally?
Naima.
Thank you so much for that question, Zoe. I think one of the key things to understand about the Caribbean is that attacks on trans people don't just show up as, physical violence. Though, unfortunately, that is one of the realities. It is also important to highlight that there is also systematic exclusion. In Jamaica and across the Caribbean region, we have trans folks still operating under the context where their identities are not legally recognized, where there is limited access to healthcare, schools. In schools, there's stigma, workplace, the same thing, and also family life. You have persons who often push people into, different margins, these margins. The work that we do at Transwave, we have managed to document how these realities affect everyday life. So, for example, in our many researches, specifically the trans health and wellness needs assessment, it showed that trans Jamaicans face like major barriers accessing gender affirming healthcare. And the fear of stigma as well keeps many away from even basic health services. So just simply going to receive healthcare is a challenge for the trans community. We've also seen how trans people are excluded from, the formal job market, and that also makes them vulnerable to the same violence that we mentioned earlier and exploitation. We also look at the attacks, and they're not in isolation. We can see how it's linked to global trends. We have a saying in Jamaica that says, when the US sneezes, Jamaica catches a cold. In essence, that means that things happen globally. Though it's seen as a different cultural context, it too affects us in the Caribbean region. What we see in the Caribbean region is often influenced by, the international anti-rights movements, whether it's the US evangelical groups exporting anti-gender rhetoric, or you have the political actors in Europe and Latin America that fuels these backlash against, trans rights. The language across the region, across the globe is the same. The tactics are the same. But what I want to emphasize is the connection that is not only negative, but it also helps being linked globally. It means that the trans communities in the Caribbean are drawing strength from each other and from movements elsewhere. So through the different partnerships that we partner with different civil society networks within the region, as well as different global advocacy spaces, so that we're able to share strategies, push for inclusive policies, and remind people that what happens to trans folks in Jamaica is part of a bigger global fight for justice and equality. So, though the attacks are global, the resistance is there.
Thank you so much, Sheree. I really appreciated what you said about when the U.S. sneezes, Jamaica catches a cold. We too say that in Antigua, and I think it's such a clear way to express what global politics looks like and the impact. It's clear, and everybody can
Es
understand
claro y todo el
exactly
mundo puede
what we mean by that. So thank you. You really made some salient points. And Amina, we turn to you. Amina, as a leader who has contributed to bringing more resources to the Caribbean, we would like to hear from you about the state of funding for Black feminist movements in the Caribbean. Can you tell us more about the limits and, of course, the possibilities?
Yeah, no, I've been learning so much. So hopefully my thoughts aren't scattered because I've been taking notes from everything that everyone has been saying. But thank you for that great question, Zoe. I want to maybe backtrack a little bit because I think about where the state of funding in the Caribbean was 20 years ago. And I would say we have definitely made some strides, but we are still not there. So the average budget, if you will, of organizations, just organizations across the
son
Caribbean
las organizaciones por
is
el Caribe.
roughly less than $50,000. And those are, just regular organizations that are doing movement organizing work. That is relatively small given the scale of work that is being done across the Caribbean. I remember being in a space a couple of years ago, and there were roughly 30 women's rights organizations from across the Caribbean in the space, 30. And when I asked folks to put their hands up to show how many of them were volunteers, the number was about 26 of those were volunteers, were doing the work that they were doing, incredible work, but doing that on a volunteer basis. And I think what that shows us is how limited particular kinds of funding is in this region, being able to access core support. We often say, the funding that keeps the lights on, that allows organizations to pay their staff, to pay rent, to keep the programming going, it tends to be very limited. And allow me to just kind of build on the words of another Caribbean feminist activist, Angelique Nixon. I'm not sure if Angelique is in the chat, but if she's not, please do tell her that I called her name today. She said Caribbean feminist movements are powerful and creative, but we are expected to do the most with the least. Right? We are expected to, provide childcare, carry out our programming, pay rent, do all of the things. And it really is not sustainable. And so what we see as a result of the sort of lack of funding, the chronic underfunding in the region, is that many people are burnt out. Many people are exhausted, and it is becoming harder and harder to wake up every day and to do the work. Another thing I would say that we see just in terms of the state of funding in the region is short-term funding. People love to see the Caribbean as this very small region, the little C at the end of Latin America, and I will, Sheree, this is for you, my Jamaican brethren in the space, to say, we little but we tallow. It means that we're small but we're mighty, right? People see the Caribbean as this very small space, and so we often are subject to getting short-term funding and project-based funding. So often what that looks like is organizations that are expected to do the most will receive a grant of 6 months or a year, or they will access a grant or some funding support to be able to do some work. My apologies, I'm going very quickly. So folks will access funding and then a hurricane will hit. And then they will now have to go to a donor and say, can we please redirect our money, our funding, because we have to respond to hurricanes. We have to be now a shelter for people who are coming to our space. We have to be a safe shelter for, our trans family that want to be in the space, or for folks that need childcare. So there is a lot involved. And, I don't want to sort of paint it as all doom and gloom, but there are quite significant limits. Also, one of the things that we see in the Caribbean is a huge presence of international INGOs, the big organizations that tend to sort of take up all of the funding that's available for the region. And so what that means is our smaller movement-led organizations often don't have access to huge amounts of money and huge resources because they go to these large nonprofits. And so there's a lot by way of challenges. But that's, as Angelique said, we often do a lot with a little. That's not necessarily a good thing, but it is a true thing, right? You have organizations that are operating on $50,000 a year that are, doing advocacy campaigns, working on gender-based violence, providing counseling, the whole gamut of work that's there to be done. Folks are doing that. And so my call to philanthropy is to resource this region more, to resource this region better. And I do have ideas, which I'm happy to share. I think I wrote the statistic down that in 2023, the Caribbean received 18 billion US dollars by way of remittances from diaspora communities. What does that mean? It means that and I say we, I talk to everyone who's in the diaspora, in the Caribbean diaspora and beyond, we are resourcing the Caribbean. We are sending money not just to our families, but to our communities, working on issues around climate, healthcare, education. And so I think that there are ways that we can organize better and organize together to really leverage that kind of remittance and diaspora resources so that we aren't dependent on, foundations and organizations that are in the sort of non-global majority. So I've said a lot. I can talk about this forever. I will look for questions in the chat. But that just is a picture. Maybe the last thing I'll say, if you give me one more minute, last thing is, and I say this because it's lonely for those of us that are working in philanthropy, doing this work, trying to mobilize resources for our community. And so while there are many folks that are doing the work and need to be doing the work, I would also love to see more Black feminists that are doing the work, mobilizing resources for the Caribbean. Zoe knows this. She's working in the philanthropic space, similarly to myself. I am here as a mentor, as a supporter, as a friend for folks that want to be engaged in this space because it is lonely and we need more. We need more folks that can support this work. Thank you. That was my last minute.
Thank you for that, Amina. You said so much, but so much important things that we needed to hear. I really appreciated how you took us back to in history and also, made um give us those examples for what the present looks like, but also what we want to see going forward and an alternative solution. I really appreciate it because the way that we're going to change the world is to imagine new possibilities and try new methods, and to recognize what we're already doing. So thank you for that. I want to, before we move into the second round of questions, just some reminders. Your questions, please put them in the question and answer box. There is a specific dedicated box for questions and answers, which helps us to filter a little bit better because the chat is moving so much with such lively discussion, links and everything being shared. And also, I just want to remind our speakers as we jump into a second round, we have another 5 minutes just so that we can hear everybody and we can really get the value of all of what you're offering. So let's jump right in. Johanna, we're back. And for you, Johanna, my question is, you've worked with Black feminists in Haiti and beyond. Could you talk about the role and challenges to the Caribbean and the role and challenges to the Caribbean and global solidarity amongst Black feminists? Give us those examples for what the present looks like, but also what we want to see going forward and an alternative solution. I really appreciate it because
Well, yes,
the
of
way that
course.
we're
I
going
think
to
that there
change
are
the
many
world is to
challenges,
imagine new
and some of
possibilities
these
and try
challenge,
new
there's the
methods,
barrier of the language.
to recognize what we're
Amongst
already
the
doing.
countries of the
So with
Caribbean,
that,
we
I
speak
want to,
different
before we move
languages,
into the second round
and
of
also
questions,
the
just some
access to
reminders
find one
for your
another,
questions,
because many of the
so that we
countries of the
can
Caribbean,
um,
they don't ask
keep
for
it
they ask for
the
visas,
dedicated
or
box
it
for
becomes
questions and
quite
answers.
difficult
This helps us
to go to
to
those
filter a little bit
territories.
better
And
because
I
the chat
think
is
that a
moving so
challenge that is
quickly
also
with
very
such lively
important
discussion,
is
links and everything being
accessing
shared. And
resources.
also,
And
I
I
just want to
feel that for
remind
the
us before we jump
Caribbean,
into a
there
second
is
round, we
very
have another
few
5 minutes just so that
resources.
we can hear
Like, for
everybody and we
example,
can really get the value of
when
all
we
of what you're
see
offering.
that we're in
So let's
different
jump right
feminist
in.
spaces of
Johanna,
Latin
we're back.
America, and when we're in the
We want to
Caribbean, it's
discuss
only
today.
one or
You've
two.
worked with Black
Like,
feminists in
if we are
Haiti
the
and
ones that
beyond.
we're the
Could
only
you talk
ones
about the role
in those
and challenges
spaces.
to the Caribbean
And
and
I
global
think that
role and challenges
we
to the
should
Caribbean and
continue
global solidarity
creating
amongst Black
spaces
feminists?
in the Caribbeans, Afro-Caribbeans, that will allow us to find one another, that will allow us to work amongst one another, to build solidarity amongst the Caribbean, and that the islands, we will not feel that we're isolated. And I think that one of the things that we dream is to build trans-border networks that will allow us to connect and to strengthen visibility and to imagine one another working together and to create possible things in the world. And one of the things that what I am doing currently, I'm in Haiti. I'm at the first meeting by national convening for the Organization of Construction of ETSLA 2027. This is the encounter of Latin America and Caribbean of feminists. And this encounter is going to occur in 2027 in Haiti. And for us, this has been a dream that is becoming a reality, that we can see one another, Black feminists from Dominican Republic and also Black feminists from Haiti, and to be in this space to dialogue and to see how we can continue building bridges. Because as you're all aware, currently the political context is not allowing us to have to come together. And we are trying to create these bridges and to bring down barriers of ideology and also the speeches, racist and fascist speeches, like the Black woman in Dominican Republic and Haiti, they cannot convene. So it has been all a great challenge for us to come together. And we are so happy that we are able to build spaces together of conversation. And I'm going to make use of these spaces to invite all of you and to invite the feminists, not only of the Caribbean, from everywhere, all territories, that you can be part and you can participate FLAS, because we call it the FLAS. It's going to be the blackest, and we are going to bring blackness to feminism. And we're thinking about that blackness and feminist movement. And we know all the narrative that is there in Haiti and also in the territory, looking at safety and the things that we're trying to build together, that EFLAS, that we can bring down barriers about the narrative that exists in regards to Haiti. And we want to say, yes, Black feminists of the Caribbean are going to be in Haiti in 2027, and that we can all start building more Black power, more solidarity, because I think that these are things that currently in this global context in which fascism is on a rise, and that we can create Black power and work together. Thank you.
Johanna, thank you so much. I'm excited to be in Haiti in 2027. I don't know about the rest of you all, but I am getting my affairs in order so I can be there and I can be a part of this. And I look forward to seeing you all. Johanna, what you shared, it was extremely powerful. Like I got goosebumps. And so I thank you for that. Tara, back again. Granji Bond has been spreading Black feminist knowledge through its library. Could you speak to Black feminist knowledge building and archiving as a tactic?
I do apologize. In Haiti, it is very difficult to really have access to feminist resources, whether we're talking about books, first of all, because books are not always available in libraries in Haiti. And when you find the books in libraries or even online, it's very difficult to order them. It's very difficult to get them into the country because oftentimes we have concerns with our airport, which is very often closed. And then a lot of the ports are really controlled in Haiti. Very difficult to import anything. And with that problem with the Grand Jupon, we decided to come up with
Seamless.
Order so I can be
a
there
feminist. Can you
and
hear
be
me?
a part of this. And I look forward to seeing you all. Johanna, what you
There
shared
is
was extremely
a
powerful.
feminist library
And I look
online
forward
that
to
will make
Look
it
for it
seeing
possible
also.
you.
to democratize
Tara,
feminist thinking and to
back
allow
again.
young feminist
Granji
women to have
has
access
been
to
spreading
knowledge,
Black
and
feminist
everybody
knowledge
should
through
have
its
access
library.
to feminist
Could you speak to
resources. And
Black
especially
feminist
because
knowledge
in the
building
history
and
of our struggle in
archiving
Haiti,
as
we
a
have a major
tactic?
problem of building archives because when there's a crisis in the country, when there's a worry in the country, feminist organizations are the targets. And most of the time, they ban our offices and they destroy our archives. So we're going to have archives with the Grand Jupon or even another organization called MOCA. It is a kind of a media tech for feminist data producer in Haiti or even in the greater Caribbeans. And I think that this is really a strategy of fighting to ensure that there are archives and that people can have access to these documents that have been produced. Because when you try to listen to the feminist word. We're not talking about feminist theories and words and so on and so forth, but we're talking about the language. It is the language, it is the thinking of Western feminists that really we hear. We don't hear our own voices. Even within the feminist movement, there is an element of imperialism around the feminist word, even the word feminist thought that we hear more white feminist thinking and even the theories. And if you're not careful, the way in which you're going to have theories as Black women, as women from the South, as women from developed or underdeveloped countries, we don't have the same way of coming up with the theories like those women who live in industrialized European countries, rich countries. It is not necessarily the same point of view, and therefore the intersectionality of a struggle. And so I think that allowing people to have access to feminist resources and to build
Tara,
archives, feminist archives.
I just want you to slow down, not to get you to not trying to have you stop, but for the interpreters, you're saying a lot of wonderful things, but give us a little bit of
I do apologize. It is really it's the way in which I speak. I'm trying to calm down, but usually that's how I do talk. But as I was saying, I think that to give access to archives and build up archives is a way of fighting. It is a way of leading the struggle to keep records of what we have done and to give access to what we have produced to the young feminists or even older feminists, so that already there it is a way of being militant, and so it is a radical love for me. It is a kind of a love when I allow a young feminist to have an access to a feminist book that she would like to read. Without necessarily stretching her pocket, I think it's a form of a love as a kind of older sister, and I cannot do too much, but with grand jupon, that's what trying to do. And there is a MOCA, I said, for feminists in the Caribbean. So there are resources in Creole, in French, and even in English. You can look at that, and it is a website that I myself always recommend wherever I have the opportunity of doing so. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Tara. I really appreciated what you shared about the archiving and the work that Grand Point is doing. The I want to just interject here that like the Car Festa is going on and the Bajan government has purchased some cultural archives from Trinidad. And so we're seeing the importance of archiving in as it relates to culture, but also what Grand Point is doing in terms of feminist archiving is so powerful. And I really do think is we need that as Caribbean people to own our stories, to be able to access them. So thank you for that amazing work. I want to, before we move into the next set of questions, I'm going to ask the panelists that while you are not being the person speaking right now, Amina, Tara, Johanna, if you can take a moment to look through the question and answer questions to get a sense of which questions you'd be willing to you'd be able to answer, so when we get to the question answer we can move forward swiftly. And so now to Sheree. Sheree, often when donors are funding issues such as climate change, for example, they don't immediately consider funding trans organizations in territories affected by climate disasters. Trans-led organizations are often assigned to specific portfolios. Based on Transwave Jamaica's work, could you tell us how funders could learn to fund more effectively by applying a trans-informed lens?
Thanks for that again, Zoe. That is such an important question, and I believe that Amina kind of touched on it earlier with her response as well. I think one of the biggest challenges is that funders see the trans issues as, under one umbrella, meaning it's under either LGBTQI rights or gender equality. That then means that when it comes on to things like funding climate change, disaster resilience, even health, they don't normally see how a trans-led organization should be resourced in those specific categories. But what we've seen through our work at Transwave is that trans communities are directly affected by these broader issues. So separate and apart from, putting everybody in a box or a little circle, um, and looking at it as it as just gender, what affects the gender equality, we see how these other issues are affected because at the end of the day, they're humans. Everybody's, trans persons are humans as well. Um, so for example, when the hurricane hit in Jamaica, we heard that trans women couldn't access, emergency shelters because of stigma and safety concerns. You also heard of, others losing housing or income and had nowhere to turn because most relief programs they didn't consider the unique needs of the trans people. So I think when donors say we're funding climate resilience, they should also include the translate groups because if they're not doing that, they're also leaving out some of their most vulnerable people in that specific crisis. So looking at it from a trans-informed funding lens, however, it is key to recognize that trans people are part of every sector. So health, housing, climate, the labor force, uh, they're not just an identity group, they're citizens first who deserve equal access and protection. So directly funding trans-led organizations like, Transwave is important because we already have that trust within our communities. For example, we're able to do rapid response work around housing, healthcare access, because people know us and trust us. So it means that funding must be intersectional. For example, a climate resilience grant should include resources for the marginalized group. Um, so when a disaster strikes again, these people are, left to anything or are vulnerable. So ultimately, I think what funders should do is shift the mindset from issue is being niche and understanding that trans inclusion strengthens resilience for the entire society. So when you invest in the trans community as well, you're investing in, a stronger or more equitable Caribbean society, as opposed to just looking at it as, just a gender equality and gender rights.
Sheree, you hit the points saliently. You talked about the fact that when trans people are not left, shouldn't be left out in the margins. But something that you said that I wrote down is you spoke about trust. And how when you fund trans groups to do this intersectional work, when we're talking about climate resilience, you're also you're giving trans people the opportunity to be supported by people they trust, which is important to address their needs. So like that, to me, I think that would sometimes we think about, oh, give the group, but because they deserve it. But you went to something that is core. It's trust. It's a relationship. It's people's lives, and we want them to be as comfortable as possible. So thank you for that, Amina. To you, this is our last question from me, and then we will take question and answer from the questions you've submitted. So, Amina, over to you. The rise of global anti-rights and far-right forces, well, has the rise of global anti-rights and far-right forces affected funding for the region? And if so, how are progressive funders responding?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Es
Before
una buena pregunta.
I'm hearing you, Aricelis. All right. That's a great question, but because I am a bad gal, I'm going to not answer your question first, but I will answer one of the questions that came in the Q&A, which was around, and it also ties to something Sheree was saying. I think one of the things that we have to do better, and like this is our space, so keeping it 100% real in here. One of the things we have to do better is the work that Zoe does, which is storytelling, which is the work of narrative change. So Sheree, you talked about sort of building this inclusive picture of what it is to resource your work and the communities in the region. But from where I sit, I read proposals all the time and I've seen, different things over however many years. we don't do the job very well often of telling the stories that connect all parts of who we are, of connecting the most marginalized folks in our communities to the work around climate, right? And so we'll often see proposals that tell these, huge stories of all the work that's going to happen, post hurricane and climate change and climate justice and climate resilience. But it doesn't speak to, the folks that are, trans folks in our community. I think that we have to do the work better. And again, this is just in our little cone of trust here, keeping it 100% real, of telling the full picture of what our communities look like, and therefore building the case for what support we actually need. So that I just wanted to maybe start with that and just say one of the things the Caribbean at the moment, right? The Caribbean, when people talk about climate change, they think of the Caribbean, right? We often hear the headlines, the Caribbean is at the front line of climate change. And, we have Mia Motley and we have all these people who are speaking about what it means for the region, but we don't hear about the people who are most impacted by climate change. And I recall being in conversation with a sister from St. Lucia who was saying, when a hurricane hits, our building that we struggle to rent becomes a shelter. And there we have to bring everyone from the community. It doesn't matter whether you like trans people or not, or whether you are a single mother or not, or what, whoever you are, everyone is in that same one shelter. There's a Bob Marley song that says, when the rain fall, it don't fall on, I say, one person's house. I think that is something that we have to keep in mind. We have to tell the story of everyone in our communities who are impacted and who will benefit from our work. So that was me sort of being very annoying and skipping Zoe's question, but I will come back to it, and I did make notes. So I want to make sure I get to them quickly. So we know, right, anti-rights groups receive billions globally, and people were asking me for where references are coming from. That comes from the Global Philanthropy Project, and folks should really follow them to learn more about what anti-rights groups are getting by way of funding. And so what we are seeing in the Caribbean is strong pushback against domestic violence protections, domestic violence laws. These things are being called foreign agendas, right? We're seeing very much like our family across the continent, evangelical backed campaigns that are blocking comprehensive sex education, blocking all of the things that sort of we know to be true about our work. So the Caribbean isn't operating in a silo, isn't operating in silos, right? We are suffering from rising threats, high levels of disinformation, shrinking space, fear mongering, this idea that we should be afraid of whoever else. I think one of the things that progressive funders are thinking about and doing is one, how to respond more quickly, right? And so rapid response funding, when we hear of attacks that are taking place in different places, this goes back to trusting organizations, being able to move money quickly, because we know that the needs are vast and things are happening sort of all the time. But also, I think another way that progressive funders are responding is funding together. This idea of different funding partners coming together to be able to say, let's resource the Caribbean together. It doesn't make sense for one funder to put 50,000 here and 20,000 here. Like, can we say we want $1 billion for the Caribbean, and we organize and coordinate across funding partners to be able to move that money to the region? And so, yes, I mean, I've said a lot. Anti-rights groups are very well funded. And as I said at the beginning, our organizations, our movements continue to be quite under-resourced. And so the work at hand, this is the work that BFF and others are doing, is how do we flip that? How do we flip that? How do we flip it so that we have resources coming to support our work, coming to support transnational solidarity, because we need that. And so I've been told I'm talking too fast. I will stop to make time for others to respond to questions. But the work is out there. The work is there to be done. And I think the only way we can do the work is together.
Thank
evangelical
you
black
for that,
campaigns
As
that are
always,
blocking
salient.
comprehensive sex
Before I jump
education,
into some of
blocking
the
all of the
questions that
things
you
that
all have
sort of
asked
we know
everybody,
to be true
I
about
want
our
to just
work.
say, for example,
So we are
you know,
the
you talked about
Caribbean
how
isn't
the anti-rights
operating
movement is
in
well
a
funded, and you
is
talked about the
isn't
importance of
operating
being
in
able to
silos,
shape and
right?
tell our stories.
We
I want to implore you.
are
They know
have
how to
suffered from
craft a
rising
narrative.
threats,
If it's one thing
high
they know
levels
how
of
to do, they know
disinformation,
how to spin things
shrinking
and to
space,
tell
fear
stories and
mongering,
to
you know,
push an
this idea that
agenda.
we should be
We have to be
afraid of
strategic
whoever
and we
else.
have to know how to tell
And so
our story, and
I
our
think one of
story
the
is the
things
truth.
that
So we
progressive
have to be
funders
also
are thinking about
steadfast
and
in that.
doing is one,
And so
how to
now,
respond more
before I
quickly,
give you all
right?
the panelists the
And so
opportunity to respond to the
rapid
questions that you're
response
interested in,
funding,
I
when we
want to
hear of
read
attacks that are taking
um,
place
three
in
questions
different
that I think are
places,
salient,
this goes
and
back
you
to
can choose to
trusting
respond to these as well,
organizations,
but I
being
want to
able
read
to
them
move money
for the
quickly
audience
because
as
we know
well.
that the needs are
Um,
vast
and so the
and
first
things are
question is,
happening
what are the
sort of
main
all the
ways that
time.
funders can support
But
Black
also,
feminist
I think
Caribbean
another way that
organizations that
progressive
are
funders are
fighting for
responding is
equality?
funding together.
What are the
This
main
idea of
barriers to
different funding
access?
partners
That's
coming
question number
together
one.
to be able to say,
Question number
let's
two,
resource the
someone
Caribbean
said,
together.
as a
It
Black
doesn't make sense
American,
for one
not of
funder
the
to put
Caribbean
50,000 here
diaspora,
and
how can
20,000
we build
here.
stronger
Like, can
solidarity
we say
in the
we want a
states
billion
to
for the
better support
Caribbean
our
and we
collective work?
organize and coordinate
And
across
then
funding partners to
lastly,
be able to move that
um,
money to the
in
region?
the Caribbean context,
And
how do
so, yes, I
gender-based
mean, I've
violence
said
and
a
the
lot.
climate crisis
Anti-rights groups
intersect?
are
And
very
what
well
avenues for
funded.
funding
And as I said
emerge
at the
when these
beginning,
issues
our
are tackled both
organizations, our
together and
movements continue
independently?
to be
The
quite
last point that I
under-resourced.
want to
And so the
make
work
is
at
two
hand,
points.
this is
I
the
want to
work that
remind
BFF
you
and
to
others are
speak
doing is
slowly,
how do we flip that?
but
How do we
also
flip that? How do
succinctly.
we
I'm
flip it
giving you
so that we
5 minutes
have
each to
resources coming
respond
to
to the
support
questions
our
of your
work,
choice
coming
that
to
I've
support
shared, also in
transnational
the question and
solidarity
answer, as
because
well
we
as to
need
wrap up
that.
with your final thoughts.
Um, and so
So
I've been
I
told
will
I'm
start
talking
with
too fast.
Johanna.
I
Well,
will
I
stop
will
to
let
make time for
you,
others
you
to
know, I'm gonna
respond to
go with Johanna just
questions.
to keep the
Um,
flow of how we've
but
been
the work is out there, the
discussing
work is
for
there to
this
be done. And I think the
wonderful
only
call. So
way we can
Johanna,
do the
I'll
work is
turn it over to
together.
you. Thank you for that. I'm gonna, as always, salient. Before I jump into some of the questions that you all have asked everybody, I want to just say, for example, you know, you talked about how the anti-rights movement is well funded
The
and
question that
how
I
it's
can
important of
answer
being able to shape and tell our stories.
on
I
how we
want to
can
assure you,
continue
they know how to craft a narrative.
connecting,
If it's one thing they know how to do,
building
they know how to spin things
partnership,
and to tell
it is
stories and to
important
push an
to
agenda.
know
We
what
have
we are
to be
doing
strategic
on
and
our
decisive
territory
and to tell
and to
our
look for the
story,
ways
and our story is the
to
truth. So we
visualize
have to
the
be
work of the
very steadfast
organizations
in that.
and
And so
how
now, before I
we
give
can
you
define
all the panelists
ourselves
the opportunity to respond to the
and
questions that
speak
you
of our
interested in, I
strategies,
want to
what we are
read
doing,
three
uh,
questions that I think are
share
salient, and
knowledge,
you can choose
because
to
I
respond to these
believe
as well, but I want to
that we
respond
know
to
too
the
little
audience
bit
as well.
of each other, of our work that
So
we
the
are
first
doing
question
within the
is, what are
Caribbean.
the main ways
And
that
this
funders can
space
support Black
permits
feminist
us
Caribbean
permits us to
organizations
find
that are
ourselves, find
fighting for
organization, other
equality? What are the
organizations,
main
other
barriers to
feminists,
access?
and to
That's
know what
question
they're
number one.
doing,
Question number
and
two,
to continue
someone said,
creating these
as a Black
spaces, digital
American, not
spaces
of the
that
Caribbean
allow us
diaspora,
to come
how can we
together
build stronger solidarity in
and
the
to
states to
tell
better
about each
support our
other, to
collective
talk
work?
about our
And
stories, our
then
our
lastly,
experiences.
um,
This space which
in the
allows us
Caribbean context, how do
to
gender-based
know
violence and the climate crisis intersect?
how we are
And what
working, what we
avenues
are
for funding
doing.
emerge when
I
these issues
believe
are
that
tackled both
this
together
also,
and independently?
I also believe
And
that
the
the
last
manner
point
in
I want
which
to make,
we
the
can
last
access
point I want to remind you to
to
speak slowly,
information,
um, but also
create
succinctly.
platforms
I'm giving you 5 minutes each
to
to
get all this
respond to the
information
questions of your
and
choice
then share
that
it
I've
among
shared, also to the
ourselves.
question and answer, as well as to wrap up with your final Thank you, thoughts. Johanna. So I will start You with know, you. Johanna, Well, I do I will think let what you shared you, about like these you know, I'm spaces gonna go with are so Johanna just to critical. keep the I really flow do want to of how express we've my been gratitude on that discussing point for to the this Black Feminist Fund for the wonderful call. So creation of this Johanna, I space, will turn it the over to you. language justice, because This is a rich conversation across multiple languages that are spoken in the Caribbean, and that is so much of a challenge in so many spaces. Usually, the English speaking Caribbean, the Spanish speaking Caribbean, the French or Haitian Creole speaking Caribbean, but now we're all here together. And so we really do have to celebrate that, and we do have to advocate for more of that, and we have to organize with more of that in mind. Um, Tara, I will pass it to you now.
Thank you very much. I am going to ask you to ask the questions. There was a bit of a problem with the interpretation in French, so I didn't quite hear the three questions. Can you please repeat them? Can you hear me clearly, please, people?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Tara, so I'm going to repeat the questions, but also if there's one in the question and answer chat box that you are interested in answering, you're free to do that as well. The first question that we have that I spoke was, what are the main ways that funders can support Black feminist Caribbean organizations that are fighting for equality? What are the main barriers to access? That's question number one. Question number two was from a Black American who said, as a Black American, not of the Caribbean diaspora, how can we build stronger solidarity in the United States to better support our collective work? And our third question was, in the Caribbean context, how do gender based violence and climate crisis intersect? And what avenues for funding emerge when these issues are tackled both together and independently? I want to, before you go, Tara, I just want to state there are some questions that have that element of funding. And if you don't feel comfortable, this is for any of the panelists who don't feel comfortable speaking about that, I understand. Amina is the individual on this panel who does work in philanthropy. So you do have the better understanding in terms of the philanthropic scope of funding. So, don't feel too much pressure, but you can also share about your experiences. You can share from the angle of your experiences accessing funding in the Caribbean. And that is so much of a challenge in so many spaces, usually the English speaking Caribbean, the Spanish speaking
Okay,
Caribbean,
thank you very
but
much.
the French or Haitian Creole
I
speaking
think
Caribbean,
that
now we're
I
all
am
here
going to
together.
answer the first
And so
question,
we
which was
really
talking
do
about
have to come
financing
together
and
and
how one
advocate
can better
for more
finance
solidarity
organizations
for
in the
our
Caribbean.
collective work in mind.
And I can talk about my own experience with the Grand Jupon and my experience also as a person who has who was actually looking for funds from donors. The main concern is that there's very little financing that is that is friendly. Most of the finances that do not make a difference between international NGOs, government NGOs, and the small organizations. Most of the donors are going to actually do due diligence with a lot of questions. And so small organizations that are working in countries in the Caribbean don't have access to all of the resources they need to access all of the information. And nobody, they're not able really to have all of the answers. And that is of concern. Now, that means that one is emotionally tired and the donors, they don't take exhaustion and the donors don't take that into account. I think we need financing that targets the needs the needs that exist in the countries and not there's another category of financing that it says that you that one can ask ourselves, what I am financing, is it necessary? Or do the organizations in that country really need to do what I'm asking them to do? I think we need financing that would be based on confidence, on respect, based on solidarity that would allow us to co-create our movements in our countries, and which would also understand that we're small associations that we're working with people we don't pay most of the people who work with us. So if I don't pay somebody, I cannot demand that they prepare as 100-page report as sometimes requested. And I think that's what it is. We need funders who understand that situation and who work in the same area as we are working in. And I think for myself and for better finance the organizations, to better finance us, you have to listen to us. You have to understand our needs. You have to understand our objectives. You have to understand how we work. Thank you.
Oh, that was, you ended extremely strongly there, Tara. It's that need to understand, and a lot of the funding landscape, the reality is, it's a lot of people who don't look like us. There are people like Amana and I in this space, but as Amana said, we need more of us. We need more of us in the space to understand. Um, Tara, before we move on to anybody else, I wanted to ask you, how do people access the library? Did you hear me?
Whether it is that library, I think it's called FAMUCA. Uh, as whether when you talk about the Grand Report, the link is accessible on our website. And after the meeting, I'm going to ask the person in charge of communications to share it on Instagram, Facebook, and so on and so forth. And the first publication will be targeting that because ideally, the we can have an Instagram channel, or Instagram, where we can have we can have conversations as often as possible, and we can share information on that Instagram page. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I, for one, will be checking out the library, and I implore all of you to do so. I have two more questions that I'm going to throw out again to our participants. I find these two very interesting. I have some answers myself. Question one for this set of questions that I have is, how do we get around this issue of people viewing the Caribbean as small and thus less important? Why is small considered less important in the first place? And as someone who's 5'2", yes, I can understand that question deeply. That's the first question. And then the second question is, how have your organizations navigated community fatigue in fighting for equity and justice, especially amongst youth who are navigating their identity and social transition issues?
All right, I think I will just jump into the first one that you said, since most of us touched on the funding topic. But to tie into what I would say as it relates to funders and how we get around the issue of people viewing the Caribbean as being small, as earlier mentioned, Amina mentioned, we little but we talawa, which means that we're maybe small but we're big. How we show up in spaces is often big, and that alone should not allow us to feel, less important because we're small. I think how we can get around this though is building partnerships. So we're all doing the same work. Um, Instead of doing it in isolation, maybe find different organizations that have the same interests as you, the same concerns. It may not necessarily be like, the same group of people. So maybe you have the um the trans community, but it's an LGBT issue. You partner with these individuals, reach out to the same donors, bring across the information that you want to, sell the donors. And I think it's also important, as you guys mentioned earlier, as it relates to storytelling. Sometimes we don't tell our story the best way that we should as well. I think we should also work on how we do that in order to ensure that, the messaging is across. Because if you're not there, they're not living the reality. We're responsible for, selling that story, getting persons to buy in, getting persons to understand, what's happening within the region and how they can be of help. So I think that is also important in getting around the issue. There was also a question about the fatigue. I think it's how do we get around that as well? I would tie that in as well in building partnerships and networks. Um, Even if it's a case where we're doing the work, we have limited resources, as we know, it gets a lot at times. what we can do is build strength in numbers. We can also access, larger organizations, ask them for technical support, ask them for capacity building, strengthening, ask them for mentorship guidance so that we can also develop sustainable ways to move forward with our work so that we don't get burnt out because it's a lot of work and we're small in numbers. Sometimes we don't have the capacity as well to meet the requirements of, say, reporting that some of these larger funders are asking for. So it's important that we rely on each other so that we don't burn out, so that we're not seen as small, so that we ensure that we're selling the story in the best way that can benefit each community that we serve. Amina mentioned, we little
Thank
but we
you so
tallow,
much, Sheree.
which
So
means that we
I'm
can be
gonna pass
small,
to
but
you,
we're
I'll be
but
quick.
how we
wi-
show up in spaces is also
definitely.
big,
I
and
also want
that
to ask that
alone
when you're
should not
sharing, I'm
allow
gonna
us
you
to
also share your
feel
final
less
words,
important
and
because
then
we're
after that, I will
smaller
have the other
smaller.
panelists share their
I
final
think
words.
how we can
So
get
over to
around
you.
Amazing.
this though
I'll be
is
quick. So,
building
I'm
partnerships.
answering a
So
bunch
we're
of
always
questions together, as I do.
interested
And so
in
someone,
collaborating
asked about,
with different
what a question
organizations
sort of along the
and
lines of,
leaders that
what
we
message to
could partner
funders or
with.
something
We're
like
not
that. Even though I
necessarily
work in
trying to
philanthropy, I have a message
go
that I would like to pass on to other funders and to philanthropy. But
let's
really,
try to
it's two things.
communicate that
One,
it's an
funding
LGBT
language
issue.
justice,
You
the
partner with
ability for us to
individuals
sit on a call like
set
this,
up
200
programs and
strong
build
from all regions of the world, and
accountability
be able to
and social
communicate with each other,
responsibility. And
that's
I think
big.
it's
It's
also
also very
important
expensive.
as women
And
to
not one
build
organization here
stories,
can do
tell
that on its
ourselves, tell our
own,
stories,
right? And so I would
that method
say,
as well.
create
And we should
avenues for us to
also
be able
work
to
on how we
communicate with
do
each
that
other
in
across
order to ensure
language.
that we have the
That's a big
message get
one.
across. Because if
Two,
you're not
again, the
there,
power of
you're not
convening.
building
We're here on
relationships.
this
It's not
call, but
about
there is so much power
telling
in
that
being able to
story.
meet each
Different
other,
people buy
to
it,
see each
different
other's
people
communities, to
understand
learn from
better
that in
what's
person.
happening
It
within the
is
region and how
cheaper
they can
for
move
me in
forward.
Antigua and
So
Barbuda to fly
I
to
think
Miami than it
that
is
is
for me to
also
fly
important
to
in
Belize,
getting
to
around this
fly
issue.
to
There
Guadeloupe,
was
to
also a
fly
question about
to
the fatigue.
even Jamaica in different moments. And so
How do we get around
even
that?
though the Caribbean is seen
I
to be
kind of
small, there are these
feel
big challenges that make it really tough for
um
us to connect and be in community with each other so that we
that there is
understand the realness of our communities and the work that we're doing on the ground. And so for all of those folks that are,
what we can
whether
do
you're
is build
applying for grants,
community.
like build that
We
in
can
and make
also
the case for it.
access,
It is
larger
extremely
programs
important
and
for us to
access
learn from each other
technical
in
support
person
and
and know
access
each other in person as
capacity
much as that is
building,
possible. And I tie that to
ask them
this
for
idea of
mentorship
partnerships,
guidance so
being
that we
able
can
to
also
and
develop
being willing to
sustainable
partner
ways
with
to move
people who may
forward
not necessarily
with our
look like
work
us,
so
or
that we
that we
move
know very
forward
well.
because it's
As an
important
example,
and
the
we're
person who
trying to
asked about the
grow.
Caribbean being seen as
Sometimes we
small,
don't have the
there's a
capacity
reframe that
as
I
well
always
to
hold, which
do
is
what
we are
others can
large
say,
ocean
encouraging
states,
that some of these
right?
larger
The
funders are
other part
asking
of the
for.
world that
So
holds
it's
that
important
framing
that we
is
rely on
the
each other
Pacific,
so
right?
that we don't
Our
burn out,
family
so that
from
we can move
Fiji and from the
forward, so
Pacific.
that
And
we
when
ensure
we,
that we're selling the
in certain
story
moments, vote
in the way
together,
and
the
the
Caribbean and the
message in the
Pacific, we
way
are
that we
actually
serve.
quite a big block, right? So it is important for us to partner and to be in community with folks who are not maybe close, may not necessarily look like us, but whom we can share, some form of identity and be able to sort of make change in that way. And more recently, this is a personal example. And this is for um, the family member on the call who asked about being from the US. I had the opportunity to visit the US South, to be in South Carolina, to meet the Gullah Geechee community. And I'm telling you, those are Caribbean people, right? In South Carolina, Louisiana, Mississippi, this idea that we exist in so many spaces and doing the work of just getting to know each other is really, really huge for the work that we want to see being done in the world today. This idea that we have to know each other, we have to see ourselves in many different spaces. So I wanted to share that. And then I think the last thing that I wanted just to say is um, to BFF, continue to create spaces like this. It is hugely, hugely important. We want to meet each other. We want to talk to each other. We want to learn from each other. Huge shout out for including this particular webinar that focuses on the Caribbean. For 20 plus years, we've been fighting not to be the little C at the end of Latin America right? And so this is a space for the Caribbean to show up. And I'm so glad to have seen so many people on the call. And we look forward to more of this. And so I'll pass it back to you, Zoe. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay. So you all, we're gonna try to be on time, right? So I need y'all, I'm giving y'all 30 to 45 seconds to give me your final thoughts. I know you can do it. Let's go. Johanna, I'll start with
And
you.
so for all of those folks that are, whether you're applying for grants, like build that in and make the case for it.
I
It
am
is
so
really
happy.
important for
I
us
am
to
leaving here
learn from each
so
other
happy,
in
so
person
motivated,
and know
so
each other
inspired
in
in
person
this
as
space
much as
because
that's
I
possible.
believe
And
we
I
have to
tie that
continue creating
to
spaces as this.
this
I
idea of
believe
partnerships.
5 minutes is
Being
not
able to
sufficient
and
to
being
be
willing
able to
to
speak
chat
about
with
all the
people
work
who may
we
not
have done
necessarily look like us
and of
or
our
that we know
experiences,
very
the
well. As an
impact that our
example,
work is
there's
having on
no
our
aspect of the
territory,
Caribbean being seen as
how
small.
we can
There's the
create,
reframe that I
build
always hold, which is
bridges
we
to
are large
continue to
oceans,
tell each other, to
right?
continue to
The
assist each
other
other, and
part
to
of
be
the
really, really
world that
quick.
holds that framing
I believe
is
that
the
the
Pacific,
Caribbean,
right?
we only
Our
need to
family from
meet to
Fiji and
find
from the Pacific.
ourselves,
And when
to
we,
build that
in certain
solidarity,
moments,
to
vote
get that
together,
power.
the
Our
Caribbean and the
Caribbean is
Pacific, we
powerful.
are
We are
actually
powerful,
quite a big block,
and we are
right?
showing it.
So it is important for us to
And we just have to
partner
continue.
and to be
Thank
in
you.
community with folks
Thank
who
you so
are not maybe
much.
close, may not
Tara, it's
necessarily
your
look
time
like
to
us, but
shine.
whom we can share, some form of identity and be able to sort of make change in that way. And more recently, this is a
I would like
personal
to thank
example. I
the Black
shared
Feminist Fund
the family
for
member on the
having
call who
given
actually
us the
represented the US.
possibility of having this
I had the
conversation
opportunity to
of
visit
talking
the
about
US
very important
office
subjects that are very
in North
important
Carolina
for
to
us
meet with the
feminists from
governor and to
Haiti, from the
see. And I'm
Caribbeans.
telling you,
And
those
what
are
really
the same
touched me
people,
is
right?
to
In South
see you
Carolina
having
working
these
together to
discussions
support
with people from
this
the Caribbean,
idea
but
that
people who are not necessarily
we
from the
need
Caribbean.
to
It's a
go
bit
into spaces
difficult
and
because
really work
in
towards
Haiti
getting
we are
to know each other
in the Caribbean basin, but we
and
speak
really
French, but
look at
other
which
people who
is
are
the
very
work that we want
close
to
to us
do.
speak either Spanish or
This
English.
idea that we
So
have to know each other, we
really,
have to be
this is
like-minded
not a simple
spaces.
initiative to
So I
organize
wanted to
this kind
share
of a
that.
meeting with people who
And
actually
then
have the same
the
experiences, but
last
there
thing
are language
right,
barriers that
is
really separate us. For that, I'm very, very
to BFF,
grateful. And I think
continue to
also
create
that is the
spaces
kind
like
of a
this.
discussion
It is
that we should continue
hugely
being involved
important.
in
We want to
because
meet each other. We want to
I
talk
have
to each
seen a
other.
lot
We
of
want to learn from
information
each
shared.
other
Many
to make
interesting
sure that
initiatives
we're
were spoken
including
about
this
here.
particular
And then
webinar that
from us,
focuses on the
from Grand
Caribbean
Jupon, we're going to try
for
and have
20
work
plus
in
years. We've been
networks so
fighting
we
not
can
to be
get
the little
closer to
C at the end
organizations
of
that
Latin
are
America
everywhere around us. And I'm
right?
very happy
And so this
to
is the space
participate
for
in
the
this
Caribbean to show
webinar
up.
this
And I'm so glad
today,
to have seen
whatever
so
time
many
it is.
people on the
Thank you.
call. And we
Thank
look
you,
forward to
Tara. And last
more
but
of this.
certainly not least,
So I'll
Sheree, let's
pass it
hear
back
from
to you,
you.
Zoe.
Great. Thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
everyone. I really enjoyed the conversations with my
Okay, so
colleagues.
all we're
Um,
gonna try to
it
be
was
on
really
time,
a
right?
good and
So I need
insightful
y'all,
way
I'm giving
to
y'all
understand what's
30 to
happening within the
45
Caribbean.
seconds
I'm
to
so
give
happy
me
that
your
the medium was
final thoughts.
already
I
made,
know you
so
can
that
do
we
it.
could each
Let's
understand
go.
each other. Because to me, that is
Johanna, I'll start with
important,
you.
making these partnerships after the call as well, ensuring that we reach out to each other, keep that connection so that we can work towards, you know, ensuring that the Caribbean is not so small, getting the work done, covering all that needs to be covered, serving the communities that we serve. So I'm really appreciative and happy that this conversation went the way that I expected it to.
Thank you so much. I see Nyla has now decided to appear, but she has perfect timing. Hi, Nyla. And now I just want to say thank you to all of you. Thank you to the BFF, to Maria Clara, and the entire team for having me, and for all of you for your wonderful contributions. I'm gonna pass to Maria Clara now. Bye.
Thank you, Zoe. Thank you for this mediation, for being such a wonderful moderator who conduced our conversation in an amazing way today. if I can sum it up in a few words, I would say what we saw today was a sociological reflection today about the Black feminist practice in the Caribbean. The people who are here today, our panelists, developed a reflection and said what a lot of people called reflexivity in practice because they reflected on the role that they have, where they stand, the place that they occupied in the field of the Black feminist context in the world, and also on the knowledges and alternatives that are being offered by this Black movements, not only to the Caribbean, but to the entire world. So I would like to thank Zoe, our moderator. I would like to thank each one of the people here who accepted to be the panelists today on this panel that is part of the Black Feminist Politics series. Johanna Jimamatingo from the Dominican Republic, Tara from Haiti, Sheree, Transwave Jamaica in Jamaica, and Amina, who helped found the Black Feminist Fund. I want to thank all of you for accepting our invitation. I want to thank the interpreters who made this moment possible because without our language justice team, there is no Black Feminist Politics series. So I thank the entire Black Feminist
Last
Fund
but
team
definitely, Sheree, let's hear from you.
for being here with us
Thank you
once
so much,
again.
everyone.
Our next
I really
session from
enjoyed the
the Black
conversation with my
Feminist Politics
colleagues.
series will most likely
It
happen
was
in
really a
October,
good and
and it will talk about
insightful way
climate change
to
from a Black
understand what's
feminist
happening
perspective. The
within the
last
Caribbean.
reminder,
I'm
as
so
soon as
happy
the
that the
webinar is
mediums
over,
are
you will
made,
receive a
so that
survey
we
with a
could
few
each understand
questions
each other.
so that we're able
To me,
to
that is
continue to
important.
improve our webinars.
Making these
So that's
partnerships
it.
happen
Thank you once again, and
because
I
we are the
wish a
people that
very
reach
good
out
day
to
to
each
all of
other
you.
and
Bye.
keep that connection so that we can work towards, you know, ensuring that the Caribbean is not so small, getting the work done, covering all that needs to be covered, serving the communities that we serve. So I'm really appreciative and happy that this conversation went the way that I expected it to.
Thank you so much. I see Nyla has now decided to appear, but she has perfect timing. Hi, Nyla. And now I just want to say thank you to all of you. Thank you to the BFF, to Maria Clara, and the entire team for having me, and for all of you for your wonderful contributions. I'm gonna pass to Maria Clara now. Bye.
Obrigada, Zoe. Obrigada por essa mediação, por ter sido essa moderadora maravilhosa e que conduziu a nossa conversa hoje de uma maneira incrível, assim. Se eu posso resumir a nossa conversa em poucas palavras, eu diria que hoje o que nós presenciamos foi uma reflexão sociológica mesmo sobre a prática feminista negra no Caribe, né? As pessoas que estavam aqui, nossas panelistas, desenvolveram uma reflexão, colocaram o que muitas pessoas chamam de reflexividade em prática, porque elas refletiram sobre o lugar que elas ocupam, elas refletiram sobre o lugar que elas ocupam no campo do movimento feminista negro no Caribe, e elas também refletiram sobre os saberes, sobre as alternativas, né, que estão sendo oferecidas por esses movimentos negros, não apenas para o Caribe, mas para todo mundo. Então, eu gostaria de agradecer Zoe, a nossa moderadora, gostaria de agradecer cada uma das pessoas aqui que aceitaram ser panelistas desse painel que faz parte da série de políticas feministas negras, Johanna, de Mamatingo, da República Dominicana, Tara, de Grangipo, do Haiti, Sheree, de Transwave Jamaica, da Jamaica, e a Mina, que ajudou, né, a fundar o Black Feminist Fund, o Fundo Feminista Negra. Agradeço vocês por terem aceitado o nosso convite. Agradeço as pessoas intérpretes que tornaram este momento possível, porque sem a nossa equipe de justiça linguística não tem série de políticas feministas negras, e eu agradeço toda a equipe do Black Feminist Fund, do Fundo Feminista Negra, por estar aqui conosco mais uma vez. A nossa próxima sessão da série de políticas feministas negras deverá ocorrer em outubro e irá discutir sobre justiça climática desde uma perspectiva feminista negra. Último lembrete, assim que o webinar acabar, vocês vão receber um survey com algumas perguntas para que a gente possa continuar melhorando os nossos webinars. E é isso, muito obrigado e eu desejo aqui um ótimo dia para vocês. Tchau, tchau!